the grand jury in Ferguson, Missouri, has reached a decision. That decision is no reason to find charges against the police officer in the case of the death of the unarmed teenager in Ferguson, Missouri.
What happened Monday night reminded me personally of another sensational moment in American media. When the O.J. Simpson verdict was announced, America gathered around its then archaic media devices to hear a decision and then watch to see when the riots would break out. Perhaps it's a sad commentary, not just on how far we haven't come, but also how the media was covering Ferguson and hoping to capture what everyone calls the money shot. Let's dig in on this and a whole lot more. A pleasure to welcome to MidPoint award-winning broadcast journalist, best-selling author, including her first effort entitled Secrets Can Be Murder, What America's Sensational Crimes Tell Us About Ourselves. Most recently hosted the HLN network, Jane Velez-Mitchell joins us. Jane, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Ed.
It is, I think, fair to say, Jane, and I think you just heard my introduction there, that many times the media looks for it, we're sent out, but there was a lot of sensationalism on this case right from the very beginning, and all the tremendous, breathy hyperbole that went on. Even the folks, the legal folks there in Ferguson, had to take the media to task and say, you're part of the problem. I tend to think they were right.
I don't blame the media. I do say Dorian Johnson, who was with Michael Brown during this fateful encounter, really started it off on the wrong foot by suggesting they were two law-abiding citizens walking down the street and they were attacked by this police officer when nothing could be further from the truth. And what happened was that it was many days later that we started hearing about all the nuances in this story, namely that Michael Brown had been, according to authorities, and they provided videotape, involved in a robbery at a convenience store about 10 minutes before the deadly encounter, and that he had shoved a clerk. So he had shown aggression there. We didn't know that at first, and by that time the story had really taken off. But I will say this, on my new site, JaneUnchained.com, I just did a survey. 70% of those responding, and it's a broad cross-section of Americans, believe the grand jury made the right decision, and I have to agree with them, because there is racial profiling, Ed. There is police brutality. There are a whole bunch of problems. We do need more African Americans as police officers in communities that are primarily African American. But this was not the case to choose to make that point. This was a case with so many nuances, with so many gray areas, with this backstory of a robbery, with this struggle at the police car, which the officer testified to, and there is forensic evidence to back up his story, namely Michael Brown's blood on the inside of his police car. I believe this was the wrong case to choose, and I feel like our entire culture conspired to choose this case because, well, we all love conflict. That's what we're hooked on as a culture.
Isn't it also endemic, though, that when you talk about a number of the members of the media, we talk about it here, you've talked about it on shows before, it is our job to continue to use the word alleged, and we don't know, and we don't have all the facts. But even this morning, I heard somebody on one of the network morning shows say, oh, wait a minute, this should have been involuntary manslaughter. This was not an attorney. This was a co-host of a show. This is part of the problem, and this helps to drive a lot of the discourse and a lot of the anger.
Well, respectfully, Ed, news has changed so rapidly. It's gotten so fragmented. I started out years ago as a reporter who just reported who, what, when, where, why, how. And then suddenly I started giving my opinion. And you know what? It's a free country. That's what's great about America, is that we can give our opinions. It's messy, it's complicated, but it's better than living in China where they shut the internet down so that nobody can see the Hong Kong demonstrations.
And it is taken respectfully, Jane. I will say exactly that, because I give my opinions here as well. But we always need to make sure that we codify that and make sure that we make people know that we're not experts sometime, correct?
Absolutely. But you know what? If the experts were so fantastic, our country wouldn't be in the shape it is today. So I think that it's important to have voices that are not just inside the Beltway and people who have all sorts of degrees and have memorized the names of all the cabinet members. We need to have other voices, people who are studying other things, because we're having the same conversations over and over again. And I personally believe that we've created these boxes that don't really apply anymore. Liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican. And, you know, so many Americans have rejected the entire thing and and say, you know what, it's broken. And we want new answers. You're not going to get new answers by talking to the same old people over and over again.
Trust me something, Jane, you're talking to somebody who rarely takes what says and what goes on inside the Beltway as fact. Trust me on that. Hang on just a second. We're going to get back to a second turn with Jane Velez-Mitchell after the break. And later this hour, the activist who was on the ground Monday night in Ferguson. It's coming up right here on MidPoint. Welcome back to MidPoint, and also welcome back veteran broadcast journalist and author Jane Velez-Mitchell. Jane, last segment you said that you talked about the conversation we need now. So in your opinion, first of all, let's look at Ferguson. What is the conversation this nation needs to have right now with regard to cops, people, black, white, and all the rest?
Well, first of all, I started a hashtag, badge cams now. If every officer in America had a badge cam, we wouldn't be having this discussion. There wouldn't be riots because we would have seen exactly what transpired. So this is what I call reactive justice. Oh, we can't afford to install the badge cams, but we can spend millions and millions of dollars of tax dollars bringing in the National Guard, and imagine what it's going to cost to clean up that mess and all the stuff that was destroyed last night. I mean, if we just invested proactively, we would have seen exactly what happened. And this is such an easy fix. And yet, over and over again, we go through the same process. And I do call it reactive justice because it's, ooh, we don't have money to do this, that, and the other. But once the horror hits and it's a total mess, then money's no object. Let's spend the taxpayers' dollars with abandon because everything's a mess. You know, we've got to change that equation entirely.
Jane, do we also need to have the discussion about political correctness, again, as if we haven't already been having that for the last 30 and 40 years in many ways? Because we've had guests on the show, a number of people who've said that what happened last night is just abominable. The fact that the governor said that they would have the National Guard there, there would be protection, they would put up with no nonsense, yet they did with all these buildings burning, cars on fire. Some people actually believe at this point that the government said, back off, let it burn, don't get in trouble, don't take a chance on shooting anybody or getting any deeper into this, but just let it happen and go. That's despicable in many ways.
Well, I have to ask, I was sitting there watching the TV like the rest of America last night and wondering, when is this announcement going to come? It was broad daylight when I started watching. By the time I got the announcement, it was dark out. Bad move. Now, we know the past predicts the future. We know there has been unrest in Ferguson and surrounding communities at night. So why make this highly charged announcement with everybody gathering on the streets? And you could see more and more people gathering as the hours passed and everybody was waiting for the announcement. I mean, that's bad planning, at the very least.
Bad planning there. Now, what about that political correctness, though? Because there are those people saying that that's why they would not want to go forward, is for fear that they would anger the black community, again, with regard to law enforcement. Isn't that a discussion that needs to be had as well?
This. I feel, Ed, that there's conscious motivations and then there's unconscious motivations. And I feel that the culture kind of conspired to make this a cause célèbre, knowing that it wasn't the right case to use as Exhibit A of police brutality, and going ahead with it anyway because perhaps on a subconscious level there was a bit of, well, let's see this whole thing implode. And I feel that the young people who were very frustrated and crying out there on the streets were in a sense betrayed, doubly betrayed, because they were encouraged to root for a cause that had deep flaws. I would rather see all that energy taken into putting the focus on early childhood education and job training and internships and apprenticeships and all of the things that we need to proactively make people wonderful, productive members of society. Everybody wants to belong. Everybody wants to achieve. Everybody wants to feel a part of. Obviously, there are young people in that community who don't feel. They feel lost. And the answer isn't telling them, hey, root for this issue, which is deeply flawed, and as the transcripts and the evidence shows, is really not the cause to invest in. And yet, they were encouraged to do so. So I feel that they were, in a sense, betrayed.
I only got about 45 seconds left. Speaking of political correctness, I know that you are talking a little bit on your JaneUnchained.com website about PETA talking to the Obama children about stopping the turkey pardon every year.
Yes, it's making light of something that's a horrific slaughter of 45 million turkeys for one day. They are raised in horrific factory farm conditions. And frankly, Americans are overconsuming meat and dairy products. It's causing health problems that are causing our deficits to skyrocket. So conservatives out there, if you want to lower the deficit and save tax dollars, let's not encourage everybody to eat badly. Let's bring more fruits and vegetables, nuts and grains, and eat the way our great-grandparents did, which was not a burger for lunch, breakfast, and dinner.
I'll even go with that sometimes because, quite frankly, America's waistline needs to have a few less burgers here and there. I'm going to have to agree with you on that, and maybe a few less of other things as well. Want to remind everybody that the website is JaneUnchained.com. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you here, Jane. Please come back again because I have a feeling you and I will always get involved in a couple of interesting arguments, debates, and discourses along the way. I love it. A very happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, Jane.
Thanksgiving to you, or should I say thanks living, Ed? Thanks for having me on.
Thanks living. I'll go ahead and take that as well. Thanks so much, Jane. All right, time out, and we're back on the other side with another example of how America is being used by a government that has no desire to ever be our friend under any circumstance. And later on, one who was on the ground protesting Monday night in Ferguson. It's coming up on MidPoint.